Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle, along with
the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yep, and tonight we're going to be talking about something we have not talked about since probably the beginning of our Sunday Talks. So that goes back probably 2.5 years at this point. We're going to be talking about human adulthood. Specifically, we're going to get into the Enneagram of Human Adulthood. And we're probably going to do a couple talks on the subject of human adulthood this week and probably next week as well. But before we get into that, we're going to do our YouTube spiel.
Uh-oh.
Mushtaq.
All right, let me spiel at you. So you will notice, if you are new here, that you haven't subscribed. And that means you are not one of the cool kids, because the cool kids subscribe to our channel. And you can do that by going right down there and hitting the subscribe button, and then hitting that little bell so that you can be notified when we put something up. And there's going to be a lot of fun things being put up. You can also join our mailing list, and we promise not to bombard you with spam. And you'll find that down in the comments, and you can find out more about us. And you can also join our Facebook group and all of this other stuff that we do just so that we can get to know you. Announcements. We are starting, and I'm very excited about this, we are starting a series of interviews, which we are calling Meetings with Remarkable Humans.
Yep.
And that's what we're going to do. We're going to meet remarkable humans and talk to them for a while and find out all about them. And our first one is going to be coming up in a week or so. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We have many strange and interesting people that we want to hang out with and give you a window into our conversation with them.
Yeah, and we'll get to introduce them to you guys. And you may know them, you might not, but because of the fact that some of these people are people we've had in our group for a while, or people outside of it, it will be an interesting mix of folks that we'll be talking to. So other than that, you can do that whole like, comment, subscribe thing, or
Very
you can
important.
dislike.
Yeah,
if
you hate us, hit the hate button. We don't mind. It doesn't hurt our feelings.
All feedback is positive feedback.
Yes, and leave comments, because then we'll talk to you. We try and answer every comment that is left that is not like totally weird.
Yep, and sometimes we get suggestions from the comments about what to discuss next. So don't be shy, reach out to us. We really enjoy it. All right, yes. So Mushtaq.
Yes, ma'am.
What are we talking about tonight?
Tonight we're talking about the concept of human adulthood.
Ooh, swanky. Tell us more.
Well, this has become popular of late, but in order to really talk about this, I have to tell you the story of how I discovered this. And this goes back to an epiphany in the mid-1980s, where several streams of thought came together for me in a giant aha moment. And there were a few different lines of thought, one of which was some years before this, meeting Robert Anton Wilson and hanging out with him and learning about his view of the 8 circuit theory that Tim Leary developed and Wilson made comprehensible. And letting that knock around in my head. Leary was always talking about larval humans. That stuck with me. And that was an important thing. Examining the concept of the 7 layers of the nafs. Nafs is an interesting Arab word. It can mean breath, it can mean soul, or most importantly, it can mean egoic self. Bumping into that, um, and realizing that this is where Gurdjieff got his 7 types of man from, which I had thought I had talked about. And I went back and looked through all of our videos and I can't find where I talked about it. So I hallucinated talking about this to everybody. And we're going to have to rectify that at some point.
Yeah, we are going to have to fix that, aren't we?
Yes. So, knocking around with the Gurdjieff stuff, he has this concept of, the I'm going to struggle with the language because he talks about it as men. We have to deal with his chauvinism and sexism, or the chauvinism and sexism inherent in um, the area in which he spoke in the time, which was at the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
So he talks about man 1, man 2, man 3,
yeah,
and all of that
mankind,
kind of
blah, 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 man, all that stuff. So we got to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So it occurred to me that the man 1, man 2, man 3 he talked about were all neotenous. They were all individuals who had never achieved adulthood. Now, all of this stuff was floating around in my head for years. And then one day, 2 wolves came to live with me. And I got to hang out with them for some years. And they taught me a bunch of stuff. And one of the things that I learned is that wolves, unlike human beings, achieve adulthood. And it's a really specific thing. You know when it happens. God, I should have gotten hold of my friend Ramon and see if he could make it for this tonight, because he has even more experience with wolves than I did. And he could also speak to this. Ramon, where are you when I need you? He's laying on a beach in Hawaii. That's where he is. But to watch this happen in wolves is revelatory, because one day they're a dog. Adolescent wolves and infant to adolescent wolves have all of the same behaviors as any dog you've ever met. And then one day they grow up and they no longer have those behaviors. They just sort of blow away. They are no longer imprinted on you as necessarily the parent or the leader. And it is a radical change in behavior. And it made me ask the question, and this is around 1985, 86, why doesn't this happen to human beings? What is it about us that makes us stop developing before we hit the adult stage? And when I looked at the idea of imprint vulnerability, and you have the 4 points of imprint vulnerability that Leary and Wilson talk about, and the last of which is the sociosexual imprint that happens around puberty. And this is where people stop maturing, in my own estimation. And I've been watching this since then, however many years that's been, and going, yeah, this seems to be the case. And using myself as my own laboratory, realizing that I suffered from this same problem that everybody else around me was suffering from, of needing to mature and go past this larval state into an adult state. And of course, having to ask myself the question, how do you do that? And there was not a lot of material about this. Nor remind me, one of the people who we are going to interview very, very soon is the notorious Bodhisattva Kid by the name
Yeah.
of Lawrence Grazios, who was actually there at the time when I was making this internal revelation of myself. So I want to see what he remembers about that, because this was an area of conversation with us.
Interesting.
Yeah. Something for people to look forward to, because Lawrence is a fun person. So I looked at two things to find the tools to figure out how to transform from the human larval stage of neotenous, immature humanity run by their emotions, stimulus response mechanisms, totally asleep, and every day getting more and more stultified, more and more solid. Because that's what happens with this. If you do not mature past the adolescent point, your consciousness sediments, and the patterns that you have get more and more solid until there's a point where, metaphorically speaking, your ego has turned to stone, and it's very, very difficult to chip it away to get at what's underneath. So, two things I looked at. One was the Gurdjieff work, because he at least talked about the idea without talking about too much how to do the things, which is always the problem with him. And then I looked at certain areas of Sufi teachings, which dovetail with the Gurdjieff work, to come up with my own tools for getting past the larval human stage. And the insect metaphor is not unrealistic. Y'all know what happens to a caterpillar when it goes into its chrysalis, right? You have a sense of what goes on there? Anybody? And there was silence. Yes.
That's the mush, right?
Yeah, they completely break down and liquefy, basically.
Yeah, we've been raising a few monarchs watching that process.
Yeah. And so there is this transformative period where everything that you are has to dissolve to reconfigure into something else. And that is not unlike what a person has to go through.
And I just want to offer everyone the opportunity to put any questions so far out there, or any thoughts they want to share. Because I saw Mr. Keem unmuted earlier, and I wasn't sure if that's because it was accidental or if you had something to say. Okay, good. Just checking.
Yeah, and I haven't really talked about this for 30 years or so.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so if everyone is on board right now, we can keep going.
Cool. Okay, so one of the
Chris,
things that
did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just was
curious.
curious.
Go for it.
Yeah.
How we're defining adult and or key distinctions between an adult and adolescence. I heard some reference to relationship to stimulus response, but was hoping you might be able to say a little more.
I was hoping you would ask him that. Yeah.
Yeah. So human adults have certain qualities, and we're going to talk a bunch about those this evening, but I'm going to mention them now, that children don't have. One of the qualities, one of the most important qualities that adult human beings have is the ability to future pace. Future pacing is the idea of seeing where your behaviors will take you. So if I'm going, oh, I would like to do this crazy thing, and I'm going to put a word in here now. That is the Persian word that Sufis use for what I'm talking about. And it usually translated, and Zainab can help me with this, as foreshadowing. The ability to know the future. So if I were to say, oh, I don't feel like going to work today, I think I'm going to blow it off, probably call in sick, go out, maybe go to a bar, have a drink, relax. A child will just do that, not caring about the consequences. An adult will look into the future and see the consequences and go, I don't like the possible consequences of this. Therefore, I will not do this thing, even though my ego would like it to be done. Adult human beings have the ability to future pace an idea, to see what its probable outcome will be, and to choose not to do something that will give them long-term pain for short-term pleasure. Zainab, tell us how to pronounce this. It's basically Pishbini, but she's going to say it better than me.
Yeah, you said it very good. Pishbini.
Pishbini, which basically means to foreshadow something, to see the foreshadowing of an event.
Yeah, we're seeing more.
Say again?
Bini means the nose, so see more than just your nose here.
Yeah, to see beyond the end of your nose. That's a perfect metaphor for this. So this is one of the qualities that an adult human being has. The second quality that an adult human being has that larval human beings don't is an actual conscience. Again, I'm going to go and for you guys, just because we can do it, we'll come here. The word in Persian, in Farsi, is vojdan. And Zainab, can you give us a bit of a translation of that?
Persians use that as in like sensing something, but more than just sensing. So I don't know how to.
Yeah, I think of it as sensing the inwardness of the other. When you have this, you can understand that the other is real, that it has an existence outside of your own, that it is not object, that it is subject. It's the experience of intersubjectivity. And the actions that one take are colored by this. Children, especially little boys, will go out and torture frogs because they have no sense of connection with the frog as anything other than object. Adults will not do this. So this is the second quality that an adult human being has. Are y'all following me so far? Anybody want to argue about this?
Would you say that's the same thing as external considering, or is it somehow different?
It's close. Mustakim is, what is Mustakim saying there, Noor?
Mr. Keem is saying adulthood, including foreshadowing, includes seeing the consequences even if it's not right. He's
Yes.
asking that as a question. Yes. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's something wrong, foreseeing that it could be something wrong is part of the deal.
Yeah. So if I am not an adult and I see a beautiful woman, I might lust after her and want to get her in bed, even though that would be utterly inappropriate and wrong. But without a conscience and without the ability to foresee the outcome of that behavior, I will have nothing to guide me away from that immediate gratification. And that gets us to the third of these. And something that is utterly important. Come down here. This usually translates as loving kindness. It's made up of two words. The words are, first word, and this is written from right to left. So the first word is over here. Well, you can't see it because I'm waving my cursor over the notes. The first word is ishq. Ishq means love, basically. The second word is mahbani, which means like kindness. You put them together. Zainab, can you give us the good pronunciation?
عشق و مهربانی.
Yeah, I like the way she says that. This is a very important Sufi concept. Loving kindness is considered to be more important than just love because it has both the passive and the active in it. Love is passive. Oh, I love this thing. Kindness is active. It is an action that one takes towards that which one loves. And the concept is loving kindness to all creatures. That should be a guiding light. And of course, you can't have this without conscience. Together, this forms a triangle. And we would say the 3 points of the triangle are function, being, and will. The function would be future pacing, the being would be conscience, and the will would be loving kindness. And you can't really have one of these without the other. They're like the old fire triangle. So these are three qualities that an adult human must cultivate. Make sense so far?
Any questions? You can give a thumbs up if you're good. All right, got a lot of thumbs up and stuff. Okay.
Good. So now let's look at this here Enneagram. This may take a moment to load up. Here we go. Can everybody see this now?
I can see it, so I'm thinking everyone else is good.
Okay. This is not complete. Next week, we will make this more complete, but this is where we want to start. We look at this and we look at the triangle, and we can see the 3 shock points. The first shock point is the realization that there is a thing such called human adulthood, and you ain't got it. The second shock point is going to be something along the lines of confronting your childhood programming. Confronting the programming of the child is another way to say that. And then the third shock point over there at 6 is going to be the surrendering of your conditioning. So the first thing we look at is the blue circle, which is the time-bound method of looking at this, moving incrementally from one point in time to the next. At point 1, we have understanding the problem. So here we are, and we go, oh my God, human beings do not naturally mature beyond, say, 10 years old. And every woman knows this. You know how I know? Anybody going to take the bait?
All right, how do you know this much time?
Because every woman I have ever known has said, men, there's such children inside. And the thing is, it's true. And so are women. Women are a little bit ahead of us. It's hard to be a mere male. So we, at point 1, we understand that there is a problem, and we start gathering information about what it is and what we can do about it. And
we have a question from Aaron. Is that cool?
Yeah,
you ready?
Please go for it.
All right. Get out of my way, mute thing. All right. Would you say it's not long after becoming self-sufficient?
What's not long after becoming self-sufficient?
We'll give Aaron a chance to respond. It like human adulthood?
Human adults are self-sufficient. Human children aren't, even when it appears that they are.
Okay, so would you say maturation is not long after becoming self-sufficient? And Mushtak seems to be saying becoming self-sufficient is part of maturation.
Part of the maturation process,
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, because otherwise you can have children who are self-sufficient, but what you get in cases like that is something that resembles Lord of the Flies or any corporate offices that you've ever been in. Here's an interesting thing. Children are competitive. Adults are cooperative. It is the nature of adult humans to find ways to cooperate with each other, even if they don't entirely like each other. It is the nature of children to compete with each other. This, of course, I'm doing a complete generalization here. There can be areas where you find this as not being true or seeming to not be true. And I'm not talking about the competition, true competition. Competition means to seek something together. So if I compete against a friend in fencing, I'm not trying to beat them. I'm trying to discover a way to excel at what I'm doing. And they are offering me the resistance that I need in order to actually discover that.
And you're doing the same for them.
And you're doing the same for them.
Yeah.
Ideally, you're doing it better than they are so that you get the point before they do.
So Aaron says, I'm thinking of a young kid who feels like they got it down because they know just enough to survive in their immediate environment. I think this goes back to the self-sufficiency thing.
Yep. And there's a lot of people like that. And it's not just kids. It's like the kid stops maturing at 10, let's say. And 30 years later, he still has the same emotional reactions as the 10-year-old. He has not become a 40-year-old. He is a 10-year-old with 30 years of practice at it. And as long as he is within certain milieus, he'll be able to survive, but not necessarily live. So here we have understanding the problem at 1. This is where I went, holy crap. People don't mature past this point, not naturally. Some people say that you can mature past this point, but it requires conscious work on your part. Both Leary and Gurdjieff basically said this. The first 4 areas of imprint vulnerability happen naturally to pretty much everyone, often randomly. The next 4 only happen through your work.
I just want to let you know that you're still screen sharing.
Yes.
And you're showing yourself. So we're seeing a tiny video of you and then a large video of you.
A large video of me?
Yeah, we're not seeing the Enneagram.
You're not seeing the Enneagram?
Nope.
Ah, let me make the screen share go away and do it again.
You still see the Enneagram. That's cool. Okay. Well,
okay.
There
Can
we
you
go.
see the Enneagram now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. And do you see a little me usually up in the upper right-hand corner?
Or wherever, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
or wherever. You can move it around. So, understanding the problem. First step. Second step is once you understand the problem, you have to find the tools. Preparation, action, shock. So as you're going around here, you go, oh, there is a problem. What are the tools? What tools do I have that I can use to move from a neotenous state, a state of adult childhood, a state of internal immaturity to a state of maturity? And you have to line up these tools at this point. Maybe you're not using them yet, but you have to begin finding them. And we know what some of the tools are. Each of the 3 things that I mentioned, the future pacing, the conscience, and the loving kindness, each have tools associated with them that you can begin to use to develop those qualities. The biggest tool that you use at this point is self-observation. And if you don't know what that is, we've done videos on this, and I will put them at the end of this so that you can see them and go back and watch them. And it's very important that you understand that this is a practice. The ability to observe yourself as your various mechanical patterns begin to move through you. So once you've found the tools, you get to your first shock. First shock is down here at 3. And that shock is finding the will to confront your childhood programming. To go, oh, this is the programming of the larval state, and I need to pass away from it.
So what would be included in that, do you think? What are some typical examples of childhood programming?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
But typically something like immediate gratification of one's desires,
Hmm.
whether they're good for you or not.
Okay. What about like, I mean, the content, I understand that gets into the story and stuff, which is exactly what we're trying to not get wrapped up into. But would, trauma responses and all that stuff kind of be
Yeah, that
in
could
there?
be in there.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Yeah. Specific reward systems, suggests Aaron. Yeah.
But all of that comes in a little bit later. First, you have to have the will to confront it before you do anything else.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is the shock point. This is the point where you go, oh my God, I am a larva. I'm a caterpillar, and I want to be a butterfly. So I am willing to spin the cocoon and liquefy myself and reconstitute myself as a new being, moving from the larval state into the adult state. Four and 5 down here represent the pupal state, right? Here is the larval state. 9 is egg, larval, pupal, adult.
Pupil as in the pupa.
Yeah,
Like,
as in the pupa. Yes.
yes. Yep. Another word for cocoon.
Yes. And not all pupas are cocoons. For instance, monarch butterflies don't spin cocoons. They shed their last caterpillar skin, and they become something else with a hard shell that's hanging up on a little milkwood or milkweed, and they spend a whole bunch of time completely transforming themselves. But there's no cocoon spinning. Moths tend to spin cocoons, and butterflies tend to just develop a hard shell to maintain the slushiness.
Got it.
So once you have gone through this shock of, oh my God, I have to confront this, point 4 is going to be observing your programming. Not doing anything about it, but observing it. Because you can't act on it until you can see it. And you may get all sorts of help with this. This is the point in the hero's journey of gathering allies. So you might find somebody who does really great body work and who is willing to lean into the knots in your muscles that are the chronic tension from where you're holding patterns of being in your body, and help you break them loose. Could be a good therapist, could be a teacher, who knows. All of these different things happen at this point. When you have done enough self-observation here, you are at the point where you have to cross the equator. And remember, when you cross the equator, you can never really go back. As we like to say, you cannot uncook the food. But when you make this crossing and you get to point 5 and you start taking action on your programming, action to decondition yourself using all of these tools that you've gathered. And for those of you who watched the thing about the 2 hidden lines, you will remember that one of the hidden lines goes from 5 to 2. Make sure that you have the right tools. So at 5, you can begin to melt yourself and regrow yourself.
How are we doing so far? Any questions?
Show of hands, who thinks that I'm crazy? I'm glad there's a few honest people here.
All right, so
5 is the hard work of deconditioning yourself. This will take the longest of any point on the Enneagram as a rule. It's very heavily weighted right here. Going through the fire. But it gets you to the second shock. This goes back to the idea of the law of due diligence. You cannot get through the second shock without doing the due diligence of working on yourself to decondition everything that you can. And this is why the sixth shock is called the surrendering of conditioning. You have to let go and let grace enter in and help you get past that last bit of conditioning. Energy from the outside has to be there for you. Does that make sense? So, assuming that you can do this and let go of the sedimentation of your being at this point with a little help from the outside, you get to point 7, which is experiencing the adult state. Once you have done the experiencing, you get up to acting from the adult state. And you're back at 9 as a full-fledged person of human adulthood. So we have just done the timeline here. The timeline is always moving clockwise around the circle, linear time, step by step. More important here is the moving lines, which you could call the Sheikh's path, which is one of the things that it has been called in the past, or the path of teaching, or any other fancy names for it. I like moving lines. That's the green lines here. This is what the teacher sees. And the teacher could be an outside teacher, or it could be you. If you understand the Enneagram, you can sit here and sit in the center, and knowing how the moving lines work, you can be your own teacher to a great extent and get through this. It's easier if you have somebody outside that understands this and can help you with it, but it is not absolutely necessary. If you understand how this works, you can be your own guru to a great extent. So,
do you feel like that's especially true for human adulthood or for many different things? Yeah.
For anything. I think it's actually especially hard for human adulthood because the conditioned child does not want to leave childhood, and oftentimes has to be tricked.
Tricked, you say?
Tricked. Here, you want this candy, little girl? Oh, did I mention that the candy is 99% LSD? That's okay.
Don't try that at home.
Don't try that at home. Yeah. So, we look at understanding the problem. And we follow the moving lines. At point 1, we look down to point 4. Understanding the problem has to do with being able to observe your own programming. Understanding the problem intellectually does not get you too far. What gets you along the path is your own self-observation and your own self-discovery, using yourself as the laboratory. So you know from point 1, you have to look down to point 4 and go, what do I need for this? What do I need for observing my own programming? And you look back along point 7, from 1 to 7, to go, what I need is to somehow start experiencing the adult state. And I can't do that while my programming is active. So I have to find a way to get that programming to chill out, at least for moments, so that I can momentarily discover the adult state within myself. At point 2, we also look down at point 4 and go, what are the tools that we need specifically to observe our own programming, and the tools that we need to act from an adult state? Different experiencing and acting. 2 and 8 are action points. 1 and 7 are preparation points. So if we have done that process correctly, then when we get to point 3, we have a hope of getting past the first shock. We have collected the correct tools, or if we are lucky and we have somebody that can help guide us through this, they have gone, okay, we know that you need to understand the problem, and the problem can be best understood by having an experience of observing your own programming, of getting that in your face so that you can see it happen. What are the tools that we need for you to do that? You need to have this tool, and this tool. You need to have the ability to do self-observation. You have to have the ability to do self-remembering. You have to understand the process of future pacing, of doing the inquiry that says, if I do this action, what will the outcome be? And do I want this outcome? You need the skills, the tools to forego immediate gratification in a lot of cases. You get to 4, you move across the equator to 5, and the teacher or the guide needs to look up to 7 and 8. Also at 4, you have to remember the hidden lines. Observing your programming, 4 goes up to 7, experiencing the adult state. 5 goes back to 2, finding the tools. Those 2 hidden lines inform the teacher. They don't do the person who is just walking the circle all that much good. But if you are being your own teacher, or if you are guiding somebody else, this becomes a very powerful tool for you. So at 4, I'm going, observing my programming must be constituted in such a way that I can experience from time to time the adult state as I do this. And that tells me what tools I need back at 2. At 5, I'm looking back at 2 going, I need these tools to do the deconditioning. I need to have a constant nag of myself to use the tools. And I have to have a burning desire to do them. And at 5, I look up to 7 and 8, and especially to 8. And the idea of being able to act from an adult state. At 5, more often than not, you're not going to act from the adult state. You're still going to get caught up in stuff. But you do enough work and you get that 1% of grace that allows you to make the shift from the conditioned, neotenous larval self to the deconditioned adult self at 7. And you'll notice that the 7 line returns to 1. At this point, you can add to the corpus of work to help other people understand the problem. This is very important.
Yeah. So then at that point, you're able to take the experience that you had in the past and that you've gained from going through this process.
Yes.
And contribute to the overall endeavor for everybody else.
Yeah. You know, maybe you write a book of poems. Maybe you open up a hamburger joint. You know, who knows? But there will be some way that you can add to the body of work that will allow others and yourself to more deeply understand the problem. And that gets you to 8, the acting from the adult state. And you notice that the 8 line will go down to 2. Acting from the adult state will allow you to discover or create tools for others to use in confronting their own neoteny.
So this is kind of going on beyond theory and beyond talking about it to doing and showing others how to do.
Yes.
Right?
You have a certain obligation to the universe to give back, whether you like it or not. And there's 1,000 ways to give back, 1,000,000 ways, 10,000 ways. And it doesn't necessarily have to look like any one particular thing. You do not have to go out and shave your head and get a begging bowl and put on a yellow robe and be a guru. Like I said, you can open up a hamburger joint. You can do whatever you do in such a way that it adds to the process of human beings moving towards adulthood. And in doing that, you will naturally add to the understanding of the problem and add to the body of tools that are available for dealing with the problem. Now, here's the thing. You're probably going to go around this circle several times before you reach full human adulthood. Think of it as a spiraling up. Every time you get to 8, you get to 9, and then you start over again, hopefully at a higher octave. And you'll go through it until there is no more conditioning left. So let me stop the share. Now, will it be of use for me to put this Enneagram up in the forum for y'all to download? Or is that extraneous?
They're saying yes, please. I want to fix a typo that I did not see earlier before we upload it.
We can do that.
Yeah. But then, yeah, I think it would be a good idea to upload it for people.
If people find it useful. If you do, keep it for next week, because in the next week we are going to make this much, much deeper. This is just the surface, because I realized that if I did the whole thing at once, we'd be talking 4 hours from now.
We're making it digestible.
One hopes.
I mean, that is the hope, yeah. So, I mean, here's where feedback is great. How is this landing for you guys tonight? Any questions you have so far? What's coming up for you? I'm inviting you all to start chiming in. Or I'm going to start calling on y'all. We can do it that way too. You know, I like doing that. So,
Well, let me chime.
all right.
Actually, I kind of agree. I mean, this is, I think, about the first time this Enneagram stuff has begun to make sense to me, or at least shown its usefulness to me.
Ooh,
So
nice.
I'm definitely
Hot
seeing
damn.
that diagram and having a closer look at it. I did have some sort of considerations along the way. And one is that I have 3 grandsons, around 2, 4, and 6, you know. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to observe them that much this last year because of COVID.
Yeah.
But you know, these, for example, this conscience thing, I see it popping up and dropping off, and especially in the older guy. You know? So I see these things as not being fixed, but rather almost like they're experimenting with that and then falling back and then experimenting with some more. So it seems to, at least in my
Yeah, you're not wrong about that at all.
Okay.
That is, in an ideal human society, a child would do that, and they would experience more and more conscience. And at a certain point around puberty, they would go through something that would help usher them into adulthood.
Right. And I guess that's the other thought that I had. I mean, what about societies that have initiation ceremonies for their transition from puberty into adulthood? Does that maybe not solve the problem, but does that ameliorate the problem?
Not necessarily. It depends on the society and whether the society is an adult society or not. If it is a society that fosters domestication in its members, the rite of passage will not bring human adulthood.
It'll probably reflect that,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yep.
It'll reflect that tendency or that kind of like that normalization of neoteny.
Because what I'm thinking of specifically here is I'm as some of you know, I'm somewhat involved in the Mankind Project, and the whole purpose behind that was to create a transition from childhood into manhood for men in this case, you know.
Yeah, it's a very noble ideal.
And sometimes it works, and
Yeah,
sometimes it
the
doesn't.
problem is that children cannot teach children how to be adults.
Right.
Caterpillars cannot teach caterpillars how to be butterflies. The attempt of children to teach children how to be adults leads to the Lord of the Flies. It leads to criminal gangs. You know, criminal gangs are an attempt by neotenous children to find some way to create their own society of adults, and it fails horribly and tragically for both them and society. And that's what happens when you don't have adults guiding this. And if it does happen that you do something that gets somebody into some form of adulthood, oftentimes it skips an important part of the process, and you're stuck there forever. Gurdjieff talks about this in his Man 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. He observes that Man 1, 2, and 3 are all basically neotenous. My words, not his. That, you know, one has cathected. Do you know that word, cathect? Anybody know that word?
Dictionary? No, I guess that's my only association with that.
Cathect means, I got it from, I I think Whitehead. And it's the idea of putting a lot of psychic energy around an idea to form a complex around an idea. So human being 1, 2, and 3 cathect their being around either the moving center, the heart center, the head center. In order for any of these 3 to go beyond that, and most of them don't, I see man 1, 2, and 3 being the neotenous beings that we've been talking about. In order to go beyond that, you have to create what's called a magnetic center. This is Gurdjieff's notorious human being 4. Now, it is possible to skip this, to not create the magnetic center and move from 3 or 2 or 1 to 5. But if you do that, you literally cannot progress beyond that, and you don't have the tools to operate from there. It's a rather interesting problem. Gurdjieff uses the term crystallization, which I think is pretty close to my idea of sedimentation. And he says that if somebody makes this jump from man 1, 2, or 3 to man 5, the only way to fix it is that you have to painfully decrystallize yourself and do it over again. And it is a slow, agonizing process. Most people actually have to decrystallize themselves 2 or 3 times before they get anywhere useful. And the process of doing that you find in point 4 and 5 on this Enneagram.
Is there some place that you talk about what this magnetic center is? Because I mean,
Not yet.
I have not.
No,
I have no idea.
I had thought that I had done that. And it
Okay.
turns out that I appear to be completely wrong about that. I had this fantastic dream of talking about the 7 levels of the ego and all of this kind of stuff, which is incredibly important work. And it never got outside of my own skull for some reason, at least not that I can find anywhere.
I honestly don't think we've covered that stuff. So
No, I don't think so. But somehow I was under the delusion that I had.
that's okay. We will. We
Will
can
you forgive
revisit
me?
this.
Will you all forgive me for not being perfect?
Shame. Okay.
Shame.
All right. So we do have some thoughts from Aaron and Mustaqim that I want to touch on. Okay. First of all, Aaron says that's very Herodotus of you. I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to, but
Herodotus, a Roman philosopher.
all right. Anyway, okay. Aaron says, I feel there are many illusions about what adulthood is that are reinforcing because they're part of the conditioning, and we go around and around and around that way. We think things like, my mama said, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
This
is correct.
Yeah, I think that definitely resonates as true for me. And then Mustaqim has a question.
Okay.
Kid teaching kid, is that the same as teaching oneself to adulthood?
Not exactly. Not if you are using the tools that are available to you. The thing with kids teaching kids is that the kids have no clue and no tools. They kind of make it up as they go along. This is a good time to go back and read Lord of the Flies. Okay, more thoughts. Dave, talk to us.
But yeah, I'm going to future pace and keep it for later.
Oh, darn.
All right. What about you, Neil? We haven't heard from you yet today. Got any thoughts you want to share? Do I need to unmute you? I can do it. All right.
There we go.
There we
Yeah.
I do
go.
have a thought. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's related to the three acts, I suppose, that you introduced to talk with. The first one is foreshadowing,
Yes.
and then recognizing the subjectivity of the other, and then loving kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Is it reasonable to interpret these three challenges as being characteristic of the journey through the triads? So down to three, or am I
No,
misusing?
actually, you can definitely do that because these three things are based on the triangles, on the triads. You have each of those represents the affirming, denying, and reconciling.
Mm,
So yeah, you're seeing something that I think is real for whatever that's worth.
needs something to ponder.
Yes.
The other question, I don't know if it was last week's presentation or one of your earlier videos I saw, but it was the relationship between self-observation and self-remembering.
Yes.
And in this Enneagram, you've got point 3 being confronting, and then point 4 observing. And I'm just a bit confused about what's the nature of confronting in this context.
In this
Before
context, this is something that is coming from the outside of the Enneagram being brought to you. This
The
actually
conflict.
comes in from a different Enneagram, and that's why next week we're going to reword it a little bit better. But this is being shown that you have this undeveloped nature and that you can develop it. Self-observation becomes the first tool that you use in order to start developing the ability to move into a human adulthood.
Is disintegration or decrystallization? One thing, I'll start that question again. Something that occurred to me while you were speaking was spoken to people in the past who've experienced tragedies, death of a child, for example, and have said it was a very transformative experience. They had to, it broke them down completely, and they kind of grew up as a completely different person. As a consequence, I've heard people say similar things. You referenced the entheogens, psychedelics, earlier. I've heard similar stories from people who had a very deep experience with those chemicals, and other people with ritual that have they've only done it once in their life, and they talk about it 30 years later as if it happened yesterday. And it's apparently it transformed their life. I'm curious about the disintegration aspect, or the decrystallization. No, I'm getting a few things mixed up here, I know. But from 3 to 6, going 4, 5, 6, at 5, you've got to, if I'm interpreting it correctly, let go, or try and fail, I think, on the hero's journey. But the coming out of the pupil phase, or the chrysalis, my curiosity, I suppose, is how much pain's involved, if I can put it that way.
My personal experience and my experience with working with other people is that there's a fair bit of pain involved.
Yeah.
Because you have to look at some fairly ugly things about yourself, some things that you won't like. To the shocks of, for instance, losing a loved one, that can decrystallize you, or it can make the crystallization much stronger. Jalaluddin Rumi is a great example of that shock completely decrystallizing him. The moment of complete awakening for Rumi was when Shams was killed by Rumi's students. And that was the shock that got him past the threshold. It doesn't usually work that way, though. In my experience, and I have lost loved ones. There was one point where I lost my fiance when I was quite young, back in my early 20s. She was killed in a car wreck. And instead of decrystallizing me, it made me hypercrystallize for a few years. And it took a lot of extremely painful work to teach myself how to let go of that. And that happens. And it's the same with ethnogens. Gurdjieff has an interesting conversation with Ouspensky about this in Search of Miraculous in the 4th chapter, I believe, talking about some groups using, they just refer to them as narcotics because they don't have any better word. And there's, he says, yes, there are groups that know how to do this, and there are groups that don't. And my experience is that when you don't know how to do this and try and do it, it makes it worse. Because rather than re-imprinting, you strengthen the imprint that you have.
Yeah. So would you describe these as points of imprint vulnerability?
Yeah, you're definitely you're breaking down the point of imprint vulnerability that stuck you in a prolonged childhood.
So the loss of a child or of a fiance or just a shakeup like that can produce a state of imprint vulnerability.
It can.
Yeah.
But most of the time you deal with it randomly unless you have a good teacher or you've developed the necessary habits. Does that make any sense at all?
Yes, it does. Another thought just rattling in the back of my head is the idea that there's 7, that we mature, or we live our lives in phases of 7 years, roughly 7 years, so 0 to 7 childhood, 7 to 14 physical, whatever, puberty, then sexual maturity. 21 traditionally was you'd finished your apprenticeship type thing. When I was a kid, when you turned 21, particularly if you were a boy, there was a party, you were handed a key to the home, all that sort of thing, an old ritual. But the literacy, just reading and writing level of popular culture is a grade 8 level, which struck me as somehow related.
If I'm remembering what grade A is correctly, what 14. Age would somebody be grade A in?
Grade 8 is about 14.
Grade 8. Okay.
It's the end of that second 7-year phase, and I made a kind of connection because I've seen books coming out called Emotional Intelligence and Spiritual Intelligence. I think they're just picking up on a fad from what we've seen, but the idea of phase evolution of spiritual or emotional intelligence, structural complexity, put it that way, I just had the thought that there might be some parallel somewhere with with what might be better described in the terms that you're using here.
That could be. That's an interesting point.
Thank you for that, Noel.
Yeah.
Neil.
I'm going to have to contemplate on that because that feels like it has some truth to it.
What's that?
Can you mute my audio?
Sure. No problem. Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Thanks for that, Neil. Palon's good. Sheree, what's on your mind? I'm putting you on the hot seat. Come on. All right. Nope. She won't have it today. All right, cool. So we've heard from Mr. Keem. Do you have any other thoughts you want to share, Mr. Keem? Nope. Well, this was a lot of good stuff tonight, if I may say so, Mishtak. So I think we're going to be chewing on it.
Yeah.
And we'll have plenty of stuff to return to next week.
Yes, because we are going to pick this up next week and see if we can flesh it out more. This is a subject that should be talked about in weeks and weeks and months, probably, instead of an hour.
Yeah, I'm seeing some nods of affirmation on that. So I think this is something that's thought-provoking for everyone here tonight. And that's a good thing. I'm glad we can touch on something that will hopefully give us a lot to chew on in the weeks to come, both as a group and individually. Anything else you want to add, Mushtaq?
Oh, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I want to add, but
Future pacing?
yeah, I'm going. We don't want to be here till 4 a.m. You and I have some food to eat.
I'm starving, as they say in my homeland in Boston. All right, guys. So why don't we do Brady Bunch mode and give everybody watching a wave goodbye?
Any last thoughts from anybody who hasn't said anything, Dave?
No.
I'm gonna twist and twist until I get the answer I'm looking for, or the answer I'm not looking for. All right. Then goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for putting up with us one more time. Good to see you again, Ilmar. And we'll talk with you all soon.
Okay.